This week on the show, we're going to be chatting with Mark Espie. He's recently added some additional security measures to DPB, OpenBSD's package building tool, and we're going to find out why that's so important. We've also got this week's news and, of course, answer to your emails and, of course, a BSDCAN wrap-up. So this is all coming up on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 94, Builder's Insurance, recorded June 17th, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
Glad to have you guys with us this week. We are back. It was an exciting BSDCAN.
Yes.
And, I'm still a little tired, but we're gonna do this. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, though.
Yeah. The hacker lounges were epic. You know, always my favorite part of BSDCAN, and they didn't disappoint this year. They actually started on Monday night, even though there weren't that many people there. Just a bunch of us hanging out on like the 19th floor in one of the little lounges and hacking on Wi-Fi stuff. We tore apart one of those routers and started figuring out how to work it and solder it in there and start loading images.
I was completely joking about, there shouldn't be any soldering guns here, and all of a sudden you're like, we got 3 of them.
Yeah. Well, I brought 20 routers with me, and they all needed to be soldered. So yeah, there's nice. Lots of fun with that. But yeah, I think every night I got maybe 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah, same here.
Because I stayed up, with the big group of people doing stuff and worked less on the big list of things I brought with me to work on and more on big new list of things. But the router project went very well. I built the entire MIPS world cross-builded on my laptop. And then loaded it into onto the flash chip in the routers, and it just worked. And
that's really cool.
Adrian's been working on building something he's calling BSD box, which is kind of like what's the Linux one called? BusyBox. Something like BusyBox. So basically, one super binary generated with FreeBSD's Crunch Gen that actually contains all the binaries you might need, like ls, cat, grep. All the stuff you need for your shell, but also a couple other things. And by putting them all in one binary, you can deduplicate them a bit and hopefully save enough space to save, basically, because there's only 8 megabytes of flash on the routers. They have 120. They have 128 megs of RAM, but only 8 megs of flash. And then between U-boot and everything, you need to basically build an image that's your kernel and the root file system combined together, that is maximum 6 megabytes, which is not a lot of room.
It does have a USB port in the back.
Yes,
though, right?
It does have a USB port, so you can do just build a fat kernel, stick it in the flash, and then get the root file system off the USB stick, which is probably what I'm going to do for mine.
Just so you have more breathing room.
Yeah, although with some creative removal of files, including etc services. So if you're writing the firewall, you'll have to know which port is which instead of being able to just say port HTTP and some things like that. But managed to get the DH client and everything shoved in that image. But a DHCP server was looking a little harder to squeeze in there. But with those, it would be able to do everything you need to do. I managed to crunch IPFW and IPFW NAT and libalias and all that stuff in there, and actually had it up and running and routing. So people could associate with it and get on the university's wired Ethernet network. Originally, it would pass through to the DHCP from the university, but then I got it working with NAT and everything. The only downside was if you associated from your phone, you had to figure out how on your phone to assign yourself a static IP address because it didn't have a DHCP server.
Yeah. Just tape a little USB stick on the back of
it. Yeah, exactly. Right? A little USB stick and be done.
16 gigs down at Walmart, super cheap.
Exactly. Or, and if you're really into it, on the Open or the DDWRT or OpenWRT project's website, they have the instructions on how to solder on your own USB header, so you don't take up the 2 ports that are built in. So what they actually got was a USB stick where it's just the board and doesn't have the USB connector yet, and solder that directly with wires onto the USB controller, and basically added a third USB port inside the chassis so that you could actually just have your flash storage be in there permanently and not be hanging out of the case.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And leaving you your 2 ports available as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's totally what you should do. So when are we going to have a tutorial on this, Alan? Like, we should show with screenshots and pictures.
Yeah, but one of the plans was to take a video of us doing it to one of them, but I went up for dinner while they did most of them. I was really hungry. But I do have mine, and it works, so I'll probably walk through it. I just won't actually do the soldering. But I will make a video of going through what we had to do to it and how simple it was and to do. The best part is, if you get a perfect image, you can actually upload it onto the router via the web interface provided by the original Linux install.
Really?
And it'll flash it that way. And you don't even need the serial port, although you probably want it to debug it or to get a console or to do stuff. But then with the serial port, it's actually pretty easy too. During the bootloader, you hit the sequence to escape the command prompt. And then you just, you can erase the current flash and then TFTP boot to copy the new image into the RAM. And then you can copy it from the RAM to the flash, and you'll have your finished router.
Oh, that's pretty slick.
Yeah, it's worked pretty well.
Yeah, so that was just one part of BSDCAN where you guys get to hack on stuff. I mean, aside from that, we had some awesome talks there, and we recorded a lot of interviews, which you guys will get to see in future episodes, of course, including an exciting one where we somehow set the fire alarm off at the end of it. So, no, it wasn't us. Yes. Somebody else was cooking and doing a poor job of it. But we, luckily for us, we saved that interview because that was right at the end anyway. So we're in good shape.
Yeah.
But, oh, go ahead, Alan.
I was just saying, yes, it was great to get. I think it's the most interviews we've ever gotten. We always plan to get lots, but then, there's never enough time.
You're doing stuff.
Yes, you want to. It's like, I really want to see, Warner's talk about I/O scheduling because I missed it in Tokyo because I had to go. I was watching some other talk or because we were doing an interview. Yeah.
Well, speaking of talks, you guys can now see some of those. Part of our first news story here is some of the videos are starting to show up online. So how exciting is that? That's less than a week after, but I'm looking through here. It looks like your talk already ended up online, Alan.
Yeah.
ECL.
When people were asking about it earlier, I was like, before I wouldn't expect the talks before 3 to 6 weeks or something like that.
Sure.
But they actually showed up crazy early. And we were very glad to see that.
That's a good thing, though. Got to tell Dan to stop doing that. You're setting the bar too high. You got to live up to that next year now, right?
Well, Dan doesn't do that. He's Dan's actually busy prepping for PGCon.
PGCon.
Yeah. So it's actually the company FOSS LC that does it, and it's possible that they did it in such a hurry because they're like, well, we're gonna have all the PGCon videos in a couple days. We better get these done.
Get all these out of the way.
Or they're sitting in Ottawa with nothing else to do until PGCon starts. But either way, it's very nice to have the videos available so soon. While all the topics are still fresh in everybody's mind.
Definitely. So including some of the ones that are already out. Andy Tenenbaum's talk is already out too. Talking about NetBSD using a microkernel, which is very cool. Brooks Davis did one on CherryBSD, which is a research fork of FreeBSD.
Yeah, that's the one where it's basically Capsicum extended into the hardware. It's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, definitely. There's got a couple OpenBSD talks too. Peter Hessler's and Ted Eubanks about routing domains and then Signify, respectively.
Yeah. It was also interesting to hear there were a bunch of FreeBSD people in the Signify talk, and they're looking at how we can build something similar, although possibly a little more broader in that it can do a couple more additional things.
Yeah, it was neat. There was a lot of cross-pollination between the OpenBSD and FreeBSD folks at this conference, I thought, anyway. I saw a lot of people all hanging out talking to one another from the different projects.
Yes.
Which was good. It's neat to see that
part of the point, right?
But so Stephen Bournes, when's his talk going to show up online?
That should
the keynote
be
I thought was fascinating.
Yes, it was.
When when you have the inventor of shell come and give a talk.
Yes, and especially when he says, "I still don't know how you debug a shell script."
Right.
I'm like, well, I don't feel so bad about not being 100% sure about that myself anymore.
Right. Well, if he admits to that, then we're all good. Like, we're not doing it wrong. But yeah, it was a fascinating conference. Lots of good stuff. Dev Summit, of course, was phenomenal, and I particularly enjoyed the Vendor Summit. I think you guys were doing the libxo stuff then, or was that another
Vendor Summit
UCL?
was my working group,
Yeah.
UCL. Which is really unfortunate that Vendor Summit couldn't have been separate, but
Yeah, different time.
yeah, because I always really enjoyed the Vendor Summit because it's very interesting to hear what other people are doing and how that's working, and it just tends to be a little more interactive since we go around
Sure.
and talk to more people in the Vendor Summit. Although,
Well, I thought it was. Oh,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I thought it was cool. A lot of the bigger companies were there who use BSD in their products. And several of them even said, like, they're kind of reforming their ways now, right? Like, we need to follow current and stay up to date and not do the whole fork thing again. There was a lot of discussion about that on, the perils of going your own and trying to maintain that. And then 5, 6, 7 years later, you're kicking yourself like, why did we do that? Now there's all this cool stuff and we have to do this huge forklift upgrade to get onto current again, get all the cool new features that have landed in FreeBSD upstream.
Yeah, Isilon gave a talk about that because I know there was one or two people at Isilon whose only job for the last 2 years was to help them catch up to head. And then, Juniper admitted they had the same problem, and Yahoo had the same problem. And, it's like,
course.
yes, you should definitely, reduce your diff, get as much as you can up into upstream FreeBSD, and keep up with head, or at least do your development there, right? Your product can be based on a release or stable or whatever, and can be a couple of years behind, but you have to have your development tracking head. Otherwise, if you start development on FreeBSD 10.0, you're going to be way behind before your product ever comes out, let alone by the time you want to update it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a good conference. Looking forward to next year. And only had 2 flights canceled on the way up this year. So I made it, but just a lot later than I had hoped. So, gosh, I got to change airlines or something.
Yeah, that's horribly
I can get
unlucky.
to Japan totally on time. I can get to Europe on time, but somehow getting to Ottawa, like all of 3 hours by air, is difficult. But we'll figure that out next year.
It took me more than twice that, but that's because we drove.
Yeah. Well, you guys had a lot of gear and stuff,
Yes,
right? You
with
had all
that-
the routers and stuff with you.
2
right?
giant boxes of routers, and I had all my stuff, and it was handy going back as well because I had a box of books for Michael Lucas. And
Did you guys get to sign autograph some of your books?
yes,
for folks?
we autographed quite a few books, and I also got my personal copy autographed by Matt Aarons and Kirk McCusick, which was nice.
See, I'm missing the Magic Watson signature.
Yes,
from
I
that
have,
book on the design implementation.
I asked him when I was packing, "Are you going to be at BSDCAN?" He's like, "No." I'm like, "You bastard!" So I unpacked my 2 copies of DNI, but I might make it to the Cambridge Developer Summit, and then
Oh, hey, there you go.
since that's hosted where he's at, he will
Yeah, it's
not
hard
be
to
able
avoid.
to get away.
You can find his address and go show up on his porch. Like, I'm not leaving England till I get
Your
this sign,
stamp signature.
right? That's cool. Well, yeah, I'm sure we'll be talking about the conference all throughout the next couple episodes, and
Yes,
of course, you'll see
there's-
references to it in upcoming talks or interviews that we did. That you'll
Yeah,
see on
and
future
also
episodes.
I'm sure you'll see it in upcoming commits as stuff that happened at BSDCAN, and
That's right.
yeah, it was very good stuff. We had a great time, and
Cool.
also it was in the nicer building this year, which is also nice.
Yes. Yes, this is a much nicer location. Easy to get to, but there's a Starbucks downstairs, so you can get coffee on those mornings when you didn't sleep at all the night before.
But I think the bigger difference was power at every seat instead of only at the walls. I think some of the rooms might have been a little bit smaller, which was a little bit of an issue for the keynote. But Dan and I sorted that out. We got the university AV people to run an extra, to split the audio feed that they got from their mic pack and give me the left channel. And then they used the right channel for the speakers in the room. And then from that feed, I did a stream to the BSD Now site and pulled that up in a second room that we weren't using right then, so that the 80 or so people that wouldn't fit in the main room could watch the keynote from the second room.
Which I think this is the first BSD conference I've been to where they had to have an overflow. room.
Japan had that for the keynote as well. but that's because
Japan
everything
did.
is
Okay.
small in Japan.
Yeah,
But,
true. The rooms are not that big.
Yeah, the big thing was that BSDCAN was bigger than it's ever been.
What was the final tally? Was it 350-ish, 340 something? I think?
283.
283?
Yeah. But the record last year was 241, and the year before that was like 220.
Nice.
So
nice.
the growth has been doubling every year.
Yeah. Well, the fact they added another track that
Yes.
talks on is a big deal.
Yeah. Which might have just been to spread people out into more rooms since there were so many people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if we'd only had the 2 tracks, that would have been tough.
Yeah, it would have been pretty crazy. Even the Dev Summit had 3 rooms going on where it's usually not quite that much. So,
Great.
and we're waiting to see what Euro's going to do as well.
Okay, well, I guess we should get into some of this week's news, Alan. But yeah, I'm sure we'll talk more about it as the show unfolds.
Yep.
But first up, we have a documenting my BSD experience, of course, a blog post about that. And this is a scenario we're seeing a lot now. We're seeing more and more of these where, in this case, a longtime Linux user since the mid-90s has decided now it's time to give BSD a try. So he says here, that night I came home, I've been trying to find out everything I could about BSD. I watched many videos, read forums, and one of the shows I found was BSD Now. I saw that they help people and answer questions, so I decided to write in. So in this blog post that they're going to be doing, a user named Michael writes about his initial experiences trying the different BSDs for some different tasks. And of course, he starts in a good place first. The first post covers ZFS on FreeBSD, using it to build a file server for his house. And of course, he also lists some of the hardware that he used to do that. So you might get some tips there. But it's really cool. It's always neat to see like a first-time user trying out ZFS and just seeing the light bulb go off and, oh, this is cool. Look at all the things I can do. But he learned about how great ZFS-based RAID arrays are and some of the hurdles he could run into to overcome. And he's also looking to venture in the realm of replacing some VMs with jails and Beehive. So good for you. That's welcome to the club, right? We've all been doing that for a while now. But yeah, it's always exciting to see new folks trying that out.
Yeah, it was also interesting in George Neville Neal's talk. A user came up and was like, yeah, I saw that presentation you gave about how FreeBSD isn't a Linux distro at the DigitalOcean meetup they had in New York. He's like, and ever since then, I've been a BSD user.
Right?
It's like, oh, well, I'm glad that talk was useful to you.
So in addition, this blog post series has already posted a second one talking about replacing the firewall now on his self-described, very overcomplicated home network. He's replaced that with an OpenBSD box. So he said he's gone from IPFW admin to IP chains to IP tables. And now he said the simple PF syntax is very simple and refreshing. So
Yes,
that's good to see. Made the transition easy. All the tools for his networking needs, the majority of which were in the base system, he said worked quickly and were easy to understand. And of course, we like hearing about users' first experiences and how it goes when they try out any of the BSDs. And they also show areas where hard work has paid off, but they also let us know if there's areas that still need some love and attention to make it a little easier for users to get started on.
But yeah, just in general, as a developer, I'd really like to see, especially more of these first experience type things. Like he talks about an issue he had with the RAID Z, where I think his problem was he was trying to boot off the LSI controller when he had too many disks and it couldn't find the right one or something. And find out what the hiccups and the friction are for new users and try to clean some of that up so that as we get more and more people to try it, their first experience isn't quite so painful.
Sure. Okay, well, next up in the news here, we got actually some PCBSD related stuff, but we have started some experimental HardenedBSD stuff here. So TJ notes here in our show notes that we had forked the repo for a HardenedBSD stable, which we're going to be building off of current, it looks like. And the plan is here with this new branch to create some experimental PCBSD builds based on HardenedBSD, of course, with all those patches that they have integrated into that. So, of course, this isn't the first major project that's done this. OpenSense did it a few weeks ago, but this may open the door for some others. So, obviously, in PCBSD, we're really concerned about security. So, we've already got a slew of things like Persona Crypt, switching to OpenNTPD, LibreSSL, and, of course, Tor integration. And having HardenedBSD seems like kind of a natural fit there. So, this will be our first foray into that. Where I'm at with it right now is I was hoping to kick it off before Canada, but I just simply did not have enough hours left before I had to get ready to go. So the plan is at the moment, probably tomorrow, Friday, we'll be provisioning a Beehive since we got to set up a node actually running HardenedBSD to build the packages on it, since the ABI is not the same. We're going to get that all spun up, tied into our Jenkins builders so that we can start building them hopefully monthly, along with the FreeBSD current images we do. So that may be a good way for people to try out something bleeding edge, but also HardenedBSD, see what their take on some of the security stuff is in FreeBSD. So I'm looking forward to seeing what breaks, what works, and just how it goes, and seeing what the community response is too. So if that's something you guys are interested in out in the community, let us know. Give us your feedback so we know what direction to take down the road.
Also interesting, Sean Webb of HardenedBSD was one of the people that bought one of those routers at BSDCAN. And so obviously the first thing he did was take Adrian's build script and run it against the HardenedBSD tree instead of FreeBSD, and built an image for his router that was HardenedBSD for MIPS. And actually with that, because of the more strict checking and stuff they have, and the fact that they don't allow allocation of memory from a null pointer or something like that, I forget what it is, but they actually managed to find a bug in the FreeBSD tree that has since been fixed, that the less strict checking in FreeBSD didn't notice at first.
Sure. Yeah, so that's the kind of good payoff we want to find, where we find little issues like this.
Yep, and correct them. It was quite interesting to just watch him quickly spin up a build of the MIPS hardware for HardenedBSD and get that working too. Well,
hopefully with us doing builds of it, and of course OpenSense, maybe we'll see other projects out there start to incorporate HardenedBSD bits, and maybe that will encourage some of those patches.
And also
FreeBSD as well.
Encouraging people to try it on Raspberry Pis and BeagleBones and all kinds of things, and see what's different in it versus FreeBSD, and find out what issues there are and get them fixed.
Yeah, so anyway, stay tuned. We will have more news for that, hopefully, for you guys next week. I'll try it. Like I said, if I can get it running tomorrow, the plan is just let it build all weekend, because it'll take a day or two to get all the packages done, and then hopefully have an image shortly after that. Try it around here on some local systems, see what works, and if there's no problems, we'll push it upline so you guys can check it out. Okay, so next up, we have OpenBSD news. Ooh, this is interesting. Some C-state information. So, of course, if you're running BSD on a notebook or laptop, you really want to pay attention here. But OpenBSD, for those who don't know, has their own ACPI stack. So they've recently committed some improvements for deep C states to that. And we have a whole bunch of links here, a couple web pages, we have Twitter stuff, commits, etc. So far, they're talking that the change has resulted in dramatically lower CPU temperatures on their laptop, as well as much better battery life. So this is that's an exciting fix to see going in.
I remember a little while back when FreeBSD had got it's had C states for a while, but the default was to stay only in the top one, which basically didn't give you any of the savings.
What's the point?
And then recently the change, it's not that recently, the change went in that let you go right all the way to deep sleep. But actually, more recently, what's the date on this? April 27th, they actually changed the default to only go to the middle state, C2, saying that C3 ends up being a lot more work before being able to go to sleep, which includes grabbing the global ACPI hardware serialization mutex, and basically it has to do a lot of cleanup before it can actually put the processor all the way to sleep. And going in and out of that state a lot is actually more work than just staying in the middle state instead. And so after some performance testing, Adrian set the default to actually be only go down to the middle state, don't go to deep sleep.
That makes sense.
Well, especially on something...
you got to keep it warm, you know?
Well, especially on something like the Sandy Bridge Xeons, where you have 16 cores, obviously there's a lot more contention on that lock if there's 16 cores that you all have to synchronize before you can put one of them to sleep. And then, so maybe it's not so bad on a laptop, but even like an i7 laptop will have 4 cores instead of 2. And then you start talking about the threads and you still get large numbers. So on a laptop, it might still make sense, but it'll be interesting to see if you actually do better with only going to C2 instead of C3.
But anyway, it looks like this has landed in OpenBSD current.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're running that on a laptop, try out the latest snapshot and report back to the folks who did that with your findings. I'm sure they'll be curious to hear, what real world performance is.
Yeah,
getting more battery life.
A bunch of users are reporting better battery life. So
that's good. That's good. Yeah, that's cool. I'm excited to see stuff like that happening in BSD. So, of course, the NetBSD guys, we can never keep up with these guys. But over in Japan, that group, man, they just get a lot of stuff done. So, the group that never sleeps, they've hit yet again another open source conference with their usual bag of tricks in tow. But they ended up, of course, with a lot of strange machines on display that were, of course, running NetBSD. Although at this show, it was mostly ARM. And we're going to be actually having one of these guys on the show next week to discuss some of the lesser-known NetBSD platforms, hardware that it runs on. Now, do you have some of the pictures up there, Alan? For
yeah,
folks
I'm showing off. Well, I found this interesting thing: the NetBSD tourist guide.
Okay, nice.
I thought that was pretty interesting, except for it's in Japanese, so never mind.
The V220 Spark, how exciting!
But yes, they have lots of pictures here. They got their BSD magazine in Japanese, stickers, NetBSD, FreeBSD, pfSense, more NetBSD. That one looks like some kind of apple or something. I don't know what that is. Pictures of the booth where they have all kinds of hardware going on, from tiny little things to classic machines to like museum machines.
It is nice running on all these ARM platforms because it means the amount of stuff you have to lug to the conference is a lot smaller, right? No one use.
I'm like, my little Raspberry Pi.
There you go.
Dan gave me a case for. It's like, yeah, that's definitely a lot easier to lug around than, a whole bunch of hardware.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But also, they didn't really mean to show it off, but they have these like wireless something that are made out of half of a Coke can. You see them sitting there by the VT220?
I saw the VT220. I must not have
but just
seen
beside it, hiding kind of crunched between some other hardware, are these two half of a Coke cans that got antennas sticking out of them.
Now I see it.
I'm like, I don't even know what that is, but that is awesome.
Walkie-talkies in a Coke can running NetBSD? I don't know.
I'm guessing it's something like that.
Yeah, that's fast. I didn't even notice that until you said something, that they're cut in half with an antenna sticking out. So if anybody knows what that was, you should write us in. We're just curious to know. That's definitely looks interesting. But that's cool if they managed to go all the shows and show all this off. We got to get some more of the NetBSD guys in the States or in Europe to show up and do some of that.
Indeed.
At our conferences as well. I think, for example, around the States, there's a ton of Linux conferences. We need to get more NetBSD guys out with this crazy hardware and show it off. That would be fun.
Because, in George Neville Neal's talk about teaching BSD at the university level, he's like, you even go to some of the professors at the universities and talking about something, they have like millions of dollars worth of hardware to play with, but you bring them a BeagleBone or a Raspberry Pi or some little, token thing, and then they get all excited about it. It's like, oh, look, it's so tiny. It's an awesome machine. Well, I'm sure we could get lots of Linux users by just showing them all this cool little hardware stuff that NetBSD can do.
Yeah, we need to show up more of that. I got to make sure I bring some Raspberry Pis or something to like Texas Linux Fest in a couple months. Okay, but before we do our interview, of course, guys, it's time for our first sponsor this week, which is going to be IX Systems, which was represented out at BSDCAN. They had the booth there. And,
yes, well, not just a booth. While, so. Yes, you were there, but they had quite a few people there. It was you and Ken, John Hickson, Matt Olander, Drew was there. Alexander Moten was there. And, quite a good representation of the IX team.
You said Drew as well. And so speaking of the conference, that just reminded me of something, right? So I got to take the BSD professional exam, the beta of it while I was there. That was a lot of fun. Jim Brown and Drew done a lot of work on that, and it was actually it was more fun than I thought it would be. Right? When you say test, you're like, oh crap, I hate taking tests. It reminds me of school, right? But this was a practical exam. You boot up a laptop. You pick which operating system you want to do the exam in. So I naturally picked FreeBSD because that's what I know the best. And then it's all like practical hands-on stuff. Like, set this up. Can you make these services do that? And Then he has a script which will score everything, make sure you set up everything properly, services are responding on the right ports with the right responses and all that. It was quite cool. So they're still looking for people to help beta test that, I believe. So if you're at a future conference, maybe set aside a couple hours to do it. It's quite neat.
Yeah,
and I'm looking forward to them getting that out. I'd like to take that test.
Yeah, and look for it on schedule. For BSDCAN, it was earlier, so during the tutorial, so the day before the conference and the day after the conference.
Yeah.
And so quite a few people were like, oh, well, if I had known it was going to be, 10 until 1 p.m. the day after the conference, I would have scheduled a slightly later flight home so that I could have stayed and taken the exam.
So, I'm not sure if they're doing it at Euro this year, but if they are, I would assume they are. But if they are, maybe set aside a little time. Figure a couple hours at least, so you can sit and do that. Because I think that would help them out a lot, so they can get that all scored, get the stats over to their psychometration, and make this a real deal here pretty soon.
Yeah, because I remember I took the beta of the written associate's exam back in 2006, and even then, it took them a couple of years to get enough test results to validate their testing methodology to be able to publish the actual test.
There's a lot of hoops they got to jump through to make it a valid, certified, accepted by businesses tests and everything.
Yeah, it's much more rigorous than a lot of the exams you see, where it's just like, oh, I went and paid for an exam and got a certification that everybody has. Like we interviewed Jim in Tokyo earlier this year, and he says, they've still, for the associate's exam, they have exactly what they want, which is a 50% failure rate. Only the top half of people that take the test actually get certified. And that's, that's a big difference compared to if you look at some of the Microsoft certifications, where it's like 98% of the people that take the test pass. Yep.
Well, we should get back to the sponsor. Sorry, I got distracted there, right?
Yeah.
But of course, it's going to be ixsystems.com/BSD Now, where you can go and fill out the form. Let them know that we sent you. Of course, we would appreciate that. I know a lot of you guys have, so I thank you for that in particular. That's been really good. And of course, talk to those guys over at IX Systems. If you were at BSDCAN, you could have talked to a lot of us or a lot of them in person, which would have been neat. But if not, get in touch with them now or come to a future conference. I know we're going to be down at Texas Linux Fest. They had somebody at Southeast Linux Fest last week.
Yes, I actually have
they tend to hit all
pictures and so on from there as well. But yeah, if you just go to the IX front page and check out the bottom corner, they usually have a little image showing off where they'll be next. It currently just says Ottawa, but I'm sure that'll be updated shortly. And as we said, they have the one from images from Self and a trip report talking about all the cool things that they saw.
But yeah, IX Systems, let them go talk to those folks. If you can meet them in person, great. But otherwise, give them a call. Don't be scared. Their sales engineers are professional and will hook you up with whatever it is you're looking for. I mean, I saw Matt Finney was there at the conference, and he was hooking up some various folks with different systems while he was there. So just get in touch, and they speak your language. If you're a sysadmin or engineer, they're going to know all that stuff and can help make sure they get the right solution for whatever problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah, they also have a post up on their What's New section talking about how people are often surprised by how much less expensive IX gear is than HP or whatever, even though it performs better and is built of higher quality components.
That's right.
And has a better warranty as well.
So again, folks, that's going to be ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Let them know that we sent you.
Yes.
We appreciate it. So we're joined now by Mark Espie, who's here from the OpenBSD project. So first of all, you've been on the show before, Mark. So thank you so much for coming on again, and we're glad we can talk to you.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here, actually.
Yes.
Well, great. Well, since we've already asked you how you got into BSD and all that, let's jump right into today's topic. So explain to us what exactly is going on with the DPB. What is it? How did it come to be?
Well, DPB, basically, for FreeBSD guys, it's something like the equivalent of Poudouire, more or less.
Okay. Yeah.
Except that it's probably Poudouire on steroids because it has so much more, it's much faster.
Oh, okay.
Like, for instance, we have much more control about what get built at which time. And since it's supposed to run on a local cluster, we can control most things about build times and shit like that. Usually, if you set it up right, it means that all your builds are going to finish at exactly the same time.
Okay, interesting. So it's not using ZFS obviously under the hood. So you're doing a lot of different things like nullfs and other stuff to do jail builds, or how does that work?
We don't quite have jail builds right now, but we are using shared roots now everywhere, which is mostly good enough for what we're trying to do here. Sometimes it's a bit frustrating not having ZDFS, but as you probably know, we are working on lots of architectures, and DPB is working on everything, including VAX.
Nice.
And good luck getting ZFS to work on VAX.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, it only mostly works on 64-bit systems, and this is still a goal of OpenBSD to be able to run on small machines. Like, for instance, Peter Hessler, which you probably had at some point on the show.
Yeah, he was the very first person ever, actually.
Yeah. He's doing builds on the Spark cluster, not Spark 64, right? Spark 42. So we have, I think, 5 Sparks, and with that, well, you can probably manage to churn along and build something like 3,000 packages in a month or so.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's all local bits. Like, we don't believe in cross compilations. We know how horrendous that can get. Like, NetBSD breaking architectures for 6 months and not noticing because we're only doing cross builds.
Sure.
So it's yeah.
So what have you been doing with it lately, and what are some of the changes to the way it works now?
Well, basically, we want to make it more secure, which was kind of funny because it was never designed to be that way. I have to go into the trust model of whatever we're doing with ports. Like, for instance, obviously, we are going to trust the basic tool in the ports tree, right? But everything that we're going to build is going to run configure scripts, is going to run lots of tools, and we don't trust that, of course.
Sure.
So the idea is to be able to isolate one build into a specific user who is going to have absolutely no unwanted access to a machine whatsoever. And it's a big change from what we've been doing prior to that, because usually we used to run stuff on a user who did have root access through sudo. And we managed to completely get rid of that, basically. Right now, the main difference is that DPB is going to start as root, which isn't a problem because it's software that's entirely under our control. And it's going to drop to a different user whenever it needs to do something most of the time.
Oh, okay.
And yeah. And we actually have several users to do that because you need to do several things when you want to build ports. Like, for instance, you have to fetch the source files. And for that, you obviously need a user who has access to the internet. And then you also need to build various ports. And for that, you don't want to have access to the internet. So you already have 2 different users for that.
Okay. So is this something pretty common for users to do, building your own package sets, or is this more of an edge case for like your port developer team? And do the binary package flavors mostly eliminate the need for end users to do this?
Yes and no. Basically, we don't encourage normal people to do their own ports build. Especially since we have binary packages that tend to be accurate, current, and everything, which is something that Baptiste is trying to do in FreeBSD as well, as far as I know. But also, we try to make things as simple as possible because running DPB is a very good stress test for a system. So it has to be simple enough that your average kernel developer is going to be able to run it and to see performance issues and try to improve the kernel.
Cool.
Like for instance, if you want to run DPB on a local host right now, you just need to check out a port tree to check that you can build a port, which is very stupid because basically you just need to go into the directory, run make, and they should work. You might need to adjust some limits for big ports, but that's it. And if you have that set up, you just start DPB and it will start building ports without any configuration at all. It works just like that out of the box.
Nice. So does DPB handle distributing the load across multiple servers?
Yep.
And how does that work?
It's you just need to have some local setup with stuff mounted through NFS. It's all documented in DPB. Basically, you usually want your port tree to be available for all machines. You want the packages to be available, and the dist files, of course. And then you just have to set SSH access from one machine to another. Everything is going to run locally on the local server, and you're going to run SSH through to every machine that you want to run over stuff to. Not individual SSH. We are obviously using a master-slave mode for authentication, because otherwise that would be completely crazy. Like if you want to authenticate 30 new connections per second, it won't work.
Right.
Okay. So if you wanted to get really fine-grained and specific, could you deny like maybe the unprivileged build user internet access with PF and maybe sense that out? Or are there any other tricks you guys can do in the background?
Yeah, this is already what we are doing right now.
Okay.
My builds are working with build user who doesn't have internet access. That's something I still need to test because I didn't change the default rules, and I just noticed that I still have a skip on loopback. So it means that the unprivileged user still has DNS access, but through a localhost because I'm running unbound on those machines. But that's all the access it has, and it already found a few issues in the port tree, like some configure scripts are trying to run ping and shit like that. Oh yeah, not only does it not have network access, but it's actually running in a slash root which has no SUID on the partition.
That's good.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's almost impossible for things to escape from there.
Good. So do users need to take any additional steps to make sure that they get all these new security policies? Like, do they have to configure the firewall rules?
Well, basically, everything you need to do right now is to choose your users and create them, possibly. But it's been tested by quite a few people by now, and with luck, we should have those users, a set of those users in the default configuration in OpenBSD 5.8, I guess.
Right, and so at that point, there wouldn't be any configuration you can do. You could just start right away.
Yeah, that's the idea. But right now, the configuration is very trivial. My config file is something like 10 lines long, and I'm not really a sysadmin type. I'm more or less a developer, so long config files I hate. I prefer to have very simple things.
Sure.
It's always the same idea. It should work by default. You know.
No, that's definitely the way to go.
Yeah.
So, of course, this kind of begs the argument: shouldn't all the tools in the ports tree be trusted? So why do we need to lock down the package building so much? What would your argument be between those two?
All the tools are trusted, but the ports tree itself isn't. Like there have been precedents of people shipping Trojans in configure scripts in the past.
Okay.
And when you see these files that has been rerolled, sometimes you look at the details, but it's all that GNU shit like autoconf. You change the version and you're going to end up with 10,000 lines diff between configure scripts, and sometimes it's difficult to check them all, and things could slip in and you would not notice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, it doesn't mean that the packages are going to be more secure, obviously, because they're still built from stuff which is developed by various people, and you don't know whether it's going to be really secure. But at least it means that on your build machine, an issue with one package isn't going to bleed into other builds.
Right.
Which is the main point right now.
So are there any other enhancements that you've been working on? Were
Sorry?
there any other enhancements you've been working on, whether they're security related or not?
Yeah, more or less right now I'm doing my CH roots more or less by hand, but I have a script which is almost finished, which is probably going to hit the tree in a few months. And also I would like to make each build in its own separate CH root, which is going to be fun as well. We can probably do that with tricks, which we don't have ZDFS and snapshot, obviously. But if you put everything inside the same partition, you can get separate CH roots just by making links.
Okay.
So you just have to hit the tree for making something like 10,000 links, which take less than a second, obviously, hopefully.
Yep.
And it should work.
Okay. Well, neat. Well, is there anything else you'd like to mention to us about this before we wrap up?
Yeah, it's very much a group effort. Like I'm doing most of the development, but I have lots of people who work with me and test things. And basically, this all started because of the work of another developer, because Christian Weisschreiber, Nadi, has been pushing me in doing some steps in the ports tree without using root, like our fake stage, the idea of sudo install to make a package. And I didn't think it was possible at first, and it turned out to be really simple in the end. And this is what started it, because once you have most of the build that can happen without root at all, then you decide, let's turn things around and let's drop sudo and let's do things by dropping privileges. And frankly, without him, we wouldn't be there. So it's very much how it works usually in OpenBSD. Sometimes you are responsible for part of the code, but if you don't have your fellow developers to try things out, you're nothing.
Yep. For sure. Well, so out of curiosity, since I run a lot of Poudre builds here, do you guys have like a web interface front end or something so you can monitor and watch for failures?
We don't have a web interface right now. It might happen at some point.
Okay.
Usually you do it through Tmux, simply.
Sure.
Like connecting through SSH, but it's still very much interactive. Like when you have a failure, you will see it on the screen, and there's a file that you can remove, a log file, after you fix the error, and it will rescan things and it will keep going. Like in most cases, I do my builds in one go, and I just monitor it during the day, and if I see a mistake, I usually fix it. And DPB picks it up, and it works until the end. Right now, I have some other developers, Antoine, whom you know, who is doing some test builds on somewhat big cluster, and I think it takes him something like 15 hours to do a full bulk build in OpenBSD.
Oh, wow.
So it means that every day he's starting a build, and he's checking it something like 6 hours during the build, and if things break, he can still fix them and have them to be finished before tomorrow.
Oh, that's great.
How many packages are there in the FreeBSD port tree? OpenBSD port tree?
Yeah, there are about 9,000 packages these days. But you have to realize that we have chosen some specific options, so most everything that you have in every report tree is there. Most everything which is useful.
Right, and yours are mostly compiled with X on by default as well, right?
X is part of the base system mostly, but we've been moving lots of stuff outside of the base system towards the port tree recently. But I think that X is still going to be in base for the time being.
Right,
like we want to have a simple installation for people.
Exactly, and that was something that bit me back when we used to do the tutorials a lot. Was I do the install and I'd opt out of installing X, and then when I tried to install a package, it was like, oh, this package depends on X. But sometimes as a desktop user on FreeBSD, you kind of wish they would include X in everything, like Chris does for PCBSD.
Yep. That's why we exist, right? We do all that.
There was a kind of discussion a few years ago about whether X was part of the base system or not. And in the end, we decided that, okay, let's do everything assuming X is on the machine. Like if you have a really small machine, these days you will have room to put the files on it. And it's not a security risk, because if you don't run an X server, there's almost nothing on that machine that's going to be a problem for you. If you really want, you can disable the 2 programs that start the X server, and that's it. Like we have a separate base package for the server. We have the libraries, and mostly these days you always install the libraries so that various stuff will work. Yep. Like for instance, if you want a web server with graphics generation, you want to have the fonts for X, and you want to have that stuff, because most stuff is going to use it. And we could do something which would be finer grained, but it needs more testing, and we're still a somewhat small team, and we want to have high quality of packages. We can't afford to be like Debian or maybe FreeBSD, where if something breaks, then somebody is going to notice. We prefer things not to break in the first place.
Makes sense. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show with us today, Mark. We really appreciate it.
So do I. I hope the video is going to turn out great this time.
It looks like it. It's been good quality on this end.
Yeah,
right?
your camera stayed solid the whole time. So.
That's great.
Hey, +1 for technology today. That's great. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much again, Mark. We appreciate it, and we'll be back in just a moment. I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. So we got, of course, a news roundup this week, a number of cool items. But before we get into that, we do want to mention DigitalOcean, where you can still go use that coupon code FreeBSDNow to get your $10 credit. Spin up a couple VMs. That's good for about 2 months there. So that's a great way to get FreeBSD up in the cloud, or OpenBSD, or of course a Linux flavor if you need it, and start messing around with that. They make it fast and simple, about under a minute to get one spun up, and next thing you know, you got something you can play with that's off-site. And of course, a number of locations they offer. Where are all the locations at again, Alan?
They have San Francisco, New York, London, the Netherlands, and Germany, and Singapore.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, plenty to choose from. So if you want something close for good latency and connectivity, you can do that. Or maybe you want something far away because you're testing something or need to put something on the other side of the earth.
They do have a speed test page where you can go and check the speed from the different locations and decide which one works best for you. And they just rolled out a new feature, actually. You can now have team accounts. So you can share resources, but not passwords, because don't share your passwords.
Oh, that's really cool. Nice.
Yes. That's
DigitalOcean makes it simple. I say, if you guys, so I use like Quassel for my IRC here. So that's one awesome way to do it. Throw Quassel up in a VM up in the cloud there, and it's all running on SSDs, nice and fast.
Yep. I put up a status page thing. I've done our backup mail server, because who doesn't need a backup mail server? Even if you have a backup mail server, you could use a second backup mail server.
I'd need a backup for the backup of the backup.
Yes.
But that's doable with DigitalOcean, right? So you can have them, again, redundancy all over the world. So it is very cool. But yeah, go sign up today, guys. DigitalOcean.com. Don't forget, FreeBSD Now. Get your $10 credit, and then start messing around with some cool droplets that they can get set up for you. Okay, so first up in the news roundup, this was something I think came out during, was it right before BSDCAN or while we were there? When I saw it, it was like I saw it on Twitter or something. But introducing Xhive, which is basically Beehive on OS X. So, of course, we've talked about FreeBSD's Beehive, the hypervisor, a lot on the show, and we've done interviews and discussed it.
We didn't really talk about that in the news this week, but at the conference during the Beehive BOF, they demoed Windows Server 2012 running in Beehive with EFI boot.
That's right.
And the patches for that are going to start landing over the next 6 weeks or so. And then separately in the Hacker Lounge, a little more low-key, they showed off Windows 8.1 running in Beehive with the built-in VNC server to control it.
Yes.
Currently, the VNC server uses a lot of CPU to do it, because it's actually just going into the frame buffer of the virtual video card and just scraping stuff out and not optimized at all. But really, the only point of that VNC thing is just a rescue console, let you get in there and do the install of Windows, because Windows 8 doesn't have a serial installer like Server 2012 does. And a couple things like that. But it's Beehive has jumped leaps and bounds forward in the last couple of months, and
maturing very rapidly.
Well, even the developers, growing. I kind of asked Peter about it. It's like in Japan, when you talked to us about the state of Beehive, you made it sound like we wouldn't see Windows till next year. Now we have EFI Windows booting with VNC and all that happening now, and he's like, yeah, we didn't expect it to be this easy.
Right. It's really cool to see how fast it's progressing. We may have to do another interview on that in the future, Alan.
We will.
Kind of a state of the Beehive or something.
Yes, and maybe even interviewing Leon, their new developer who's done most of the Windows stuff, or he's their Windows expert. Because that was the other funny thing at the Birds of a Feather session we had. Once we got Windows up and running, somebody asked, well, can you run a benchmark on it so we can tell, how it compares? And we had a bit of difficulty with, the Internet Explorer lockdown mode they do on servers. And there were no Windows experts in the room.
All right.
Nobody knew how to do
this Windows thing. How do you do this?
And then a viewer of TechSnap, who happened to be there, came down and he was like, thanks for outing me as the Windows admin. And came and showed us how to do it and got it working.
That's really cool. It's definitely growing fast. I mean, it's growing so fast now we're seeing it ported to things like OS X, which is crazy.
So this one's not quite a port, but similar. Xhive is basically a hypervisor. It's a kind of port of Beehive to OS 10, but instead of requiring the kernel module and stuff like Beehive does, it's built on the hypervisor.framework that's built into OS 10.10. And so it runs entirely in user space and has no other dependencies. However, so far, because they don't have Beehive load or the grub stuff, you can't boot just any OS in it yet. But they do have vanilla Linux distributions mostly working.
Oh, that's really cool.
It has about the same hardware requirements as Beehive. You need 2010 or later machine that has all the EPT stuff. And it talks about what hardware it emulates. And is available. It's basically the same as a regular Beehive. And it kind of shows the architecture of the original Beehive, showing how it uses, grub2-beehive, which you're working on, right?
The grub Beehive stuff?
Yeah, to update the ZFS.
Yep, working on that. So I'm looking here. I was just reading through their notes on their GitHub page. It says they have the grub2 Beehive stuff. So it's used to bootstrap guest operating systems. In other words, Linux, Open, and Net. So it sounds like they're using a lot of similar functionality there for Xhive.
Right, and so they have a nice ASCII art diagram of Beehive, which is interesting because I think it's actually a better diagram than the Beehive has.
Right.
And then they have a diagram of the Xhive version, and it shows that most of it's actually done by the OS 10 virtualization framework. And then it shows how networking works and the things they need to do still. But for one reason or another, I heard that it's not possible to boot FreeBSD in it yet. But hopefully soon. And once it has that, I can see a lot of FreeBSD developers with Macs using this quite a bit.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Okay. Well, next up here, so check out their GitHub page, and we also have a link there with some examples on how to use it. So if you guys are on OS X, that's a good way to start playing with it. But next up, we have some Dragonfly news. So if you've been using Dragonfly on your desktop, which they have their nice Broadwell graphics and all that, which makes me drool. But you might be pleased to hear that 4K displays are working pretty well now, too. So Matthew Dillon's written up a wiki page and has some of the specifics there, including a couple gotchas for setting up 4K. Of course, as he mentions, and as I've seen here, too, some GUI applications sometimes look weird on a huge resolution like that. Things don't quite scale properly. It's getting better. A lot more apps do it now, but not all. And, of course, something else that I noticed here, too, he says HDMI ports are mostly limited to a 30 hertz refresh rate, which kind of sucks.
Basically, they only have so much bandwidth, and when you're pushing 4K resolution, which is basically 4 times the pixels you get of a 1080p, you can't handle it. So that's what DisplayPort is for, because they can handle 4K at 60 hertz. But, he's not sure if they can handle dual heading it. I think that depends on the video card. My video card has like 4 display ports. So
I had a video card here. It's got 3 display ports, and I was doing dual head 4Ks, and it wasn't really any performance. I had 3D with all the KDE with all the effects on and whatnot, and it was still using almost no GPU. It was running very cool. But it could handle it, and that was like a lower end, 740 GT, I think is what I was running that on. 750 maybe. But definitely do it with DisplayPort. Getting the 60 hertz is a lifesaver. It just kind of looks clunky without it.
Yep. Also mentions that not all the hardware video decoders can do MPEG-4 acceleration at 4K. So if you have an underpowered accelerator, it will have problems with trying to play the video full screen.
Okay, next up we have some OpenBSD news talking about sandboxing your port daemons on OpenBSD. So, of course, we've talked about different containment methods recently as last week. And we mentioned that a lot of the daemons in OpenBSD's base are, of course, cherooted by default. Things from ports or packages don't always necessarily get the same treatment. But we have a blog post here that's using an example of Mumble server and how you can apply this to any service from ports that doesn't get a cheroot by default. So it's going to walk you through the process of how you build your sandbox with all the libraries you'll need for the particular port or package you're installing. And then the setup will even show you how to wipe and refresh the cheroot every time you restart it. So that's really cool, not even persistent.
Yeah, but so if anything ever does go wrong and it when you restart it, all the badness goes away and you're all clean again.
It's clean again. So it looks pretty simple. It's a pretty straightforward shell script here and walks you through setting it up. This could probably be applied to other BSDs as well, free and net and even Dragonfly. So this is pretty neat. We should take this and kind of build that as a template, or somebody should do that. Make that a template maybe in the base system where it's like cheroot this service or cheroot this app or whatever.
Right. Currently for the Mumble server we run for the podcast network, we run it in a jail, which is basically just a chroot with everything in it instead of only the specific libraries. But even inside that jail, we could do the chroot thing, and it would be possibly quite interesting.
So the only thing I would suggest to make it a little easier is he has it where it copies in the shared libraries manually. So we did something with that with PBIs a while back where we'd run LDD, like you pointed at the binary and say, make sure all the libs are copied in, right?
Point at the binary, find everything it needs, and copy all of those.
Yeah, that could even be automated at that point. So yeah, this is a really cool thing. Maybe we'll have to steal that and put that in PCBSD somewhere. That would be cool. Okay, so next up, SmartWall 1.8.2 has been released. So this is actually something we've not covered on the show before, but it's a relatively new BSD-based project, which is an attempt to keep the old MonoWall code base going, which I have a soft spot for MonoWall. It was one of the first firewalls I ever built and ran, and I really like the interface. But it appears this started around the time MonoWall called it quits, so keeping that legacy alive. But we have links here. They've just released their first official version, which is going to be at smartwall.org and, of course, /download.html. And you can grab that and give it a try now. See if you like it.
Their serial-only image is 11.4 megabytes.
Wow, yeah.
Just a little bit too big to fit on those tiny routers. But if you got the one with 16 megs of flash, you'd be set. The other complication with the little Nord flash like that is that you can't run a regular file system off of it because all writes have to be like sequential. So the way it does the configuration on the tiny routers we did is there's a little 64 kilobyte section of reserve memory near the end of the flash chip, and not at the very end because that's where they keep the radio calibration data, but kind of near there. And when you change your config, you run the cfg_save command, and it tars up all your config files, gzips them, and then DDs it to that little spot in memory. And then on boot up, it DDs it back, extracts them into the memory FS, and that's where you run from. So you have to remember, it's like one of those Cisco routers. If you don't, copy, run, start, every time you reboot, your config goes back to what it was originally.
Nice. Well, yeah, that definitely looks neat. So their website's going to be smallwall.org. So definitely check that out. And if you're interested in learning more about it, we're trying to work out something with the lead developer to come on the show in the next few weeks. So you may have to stay tuned for that. Hopefully we'll have some more information for you soon.
And it has the VirtIO drivers, so you can run it in Beehive or VirtualBox or whatever. So
does it say which version of FreeBSD it's based off of?
Based on the forum posts, it looks like it's still based on Stable 8.
Stable 8. Oh, okay. Because I thought MonoWall had updated. Like they had an experimental 10 version at 1.4. They called it quits. You remember that?
No, I haven't followed MonoWall.
I'd have to check. I remember seeing something like they did a refresh or whatever. They brought it up to something more current. I want to say it was within this last year. But
they do have a development snapshot here, but it doesn't say. But it does mention FreeBSD 8 on the page a couple places. So
okay. Okay, yeah, definitely go check that out. That should be neat. And we'll, of course, bring you more information as soon as we can get the developer on board to come on and do the interview. Okay, it's time for feedback and questions from you guys in the audience. I know a lot of stuff came in while we were out of town, so we will try and answer these the best we can. But before we start with those, of course, we want to mention Tarsnap, where you can go get signed up. That's at tarsnap.com/BSD Now. You can get signed up, and before we finish reading and answering the first question, you'll probably have your backups already going.
Yep.
Like it's that fast, right? And of course, your backups are being done fully encrypted before they leave the box, so you don't have to trust wherever they're stored on the remote end or who has access to it, because it's all garbage to them anyway. There's nothing unencrypted on that end. So Tarsnap makes it super simple to get set up. They have clients for, just about everything, including a Windows client with Sigwin, I believe. So if you need that, you can grab them. Or if you're paranoid, which Tarsnap is, backups for the truly paranoid, that makes it easy. You can go grab the source code, compile it yourself.
Yep, that's it. Best way to get a trusted binary.
That's really cool. So again, guys, go get signed up. Don't delay. Don't put off doing your backups until it's too late, because that's when it always happens to everyone once. But come on, learn your lesson ahead of time here and just get your backups set up at tarsnap.com.
Yes, Tarsnap on their website specifically says, backups should be secure against attackers ranging from your average script kiddie to major world governments. Even if they can compromise the system on which the backups are stored, which is Colin's system at Amazon, the backups are supposed to be a tool for mitigating damage, not a potential vulnerability to worry about.
Correct.
With the way Tarsnap is architected, as long as you protect that key, no one can access your backups.
That's right. Okay, so getting into the feedback and questions here, folks. First up, we have David, who asks about some installation issues. He says, "Hello, BSD people. I'm a longtime Linux user since '98 or so. Been curious about the BSDs. I have no real hate for systemd or really Linux in general, but think that having a stable base with rolling ports is a really good idea. I currently have a Yoga 2 Pro, which runs Linux like a champ, but since it has Haswell graphics, both free and PCBSD are out of the question. Said I've been running into a problem that makes installing Open and DragonflyBSD impossible. The ELAN touchscreen is constantly disconnecting and reconnecting, causing a flood of console messages. This used to happen on Linux, and I would suppress the messages using dmessage-D so that I could get through the install. BSD dmessage doesn't seem to have this option, and Google isn't helping me, so I was wondering if there's an easy way to suppress kernel messages temporarily on BSD. Thank you for any help you can give."
Well, the easiest way is to use console number 2, which doesn't get them. But yeah, if you change your syslog.conf, you can make them not flood your console and only go to the log file.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So he's asking during the installer, though. That might be a little trickier.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But
your device isn't supposed to do that.
I know, right? I don't know about Open and Dragonfly's installer, but can you just go to console 2 and kick off the installer? That would probably be the easier thing to solve.
No, but you should be able to do it from console 4. The installer is set up kind of special. I think 2 is debug, or 2 or 3 is the output of the debugging of the console, or of the installer. But console number 4 does have the a shell that you can use to
start it up again
to get it going.
Okay.
Or just go over there and disable syslog, and hopefully that will stop the messages from flooding your screen.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully that'll take care of it for you then. Next up, we have Brian, who writes in. He says, "Hello. Reading about CBSD got me thinking of having something like this would be a great addition to something like TrueOS. Having the ability to leverage ZFS snapshots with boot environments and automatic upgrades, along with an easy-to-use command web UI to manage jails of Beehive VMs, along with FreeBSD 11, maybe even Zen VMs, could really take off. Look at the popularity of pfSense FreeNAS, as I know so many people use them but would never use BSD because they think it's too hard when it really isn't. Finally, I had looked at PCBSD years ago, but what it brought to the table then wasn't much different than standard FreeBSD install with a GUI. What it has turned into is nothing short of amazing, though. Watching the info about new features on the show got me really interested, and I came back to it. But this time, I couldn't use it as my sound card isn't supported in the FreeBSD sound driver with only OSS. Using OSS isn't an option, as I'd have to rebuild the generic kernel without the sound driver, but this would break some of the killer features in PCBSD with the auto update. I want to finish off with how great the show is and keep up the good work. I have been a FreeBSD user since the 4.x days. However, you guys bring together a lot of useful information I may not ever see if I didn't watch. Oh, I'm bummed to hear your sound card doesn't work, though. He doesn't say which particular one it was.
Almost everything works with just the generic HDA driver now, doesn't it?
Yeah. Honestly, it's been a long time since I've run a system where the sound didn't work. I mean, I got a lot of systems all running PCBSD here. They're all pretty standard. So, maybe, Brian, if you could follow up with what sound card it is and how it's not working, like what some of the logs are or messages. I'd be curious to see it, just to see if it's maybe something we can tweak, or maybe we can fix it upstream for you in PCBSD if it's maybe a hint or an adjustment or something.
Yeah, and I haven't personally checked out CBSD, but there was a lot of talk at BSDCAN about IOHive. IOCage.
IOCage. Mm-hmm.
And that's the one that you're looking at integrating in
Yeah, that's the one. Well, we've switched to it already.
Okay.
So in our Edge repo, we're replacing Warden with IOCage. And we've already started making that transition for like the App Cafe web environment and all that. And that'll be in the 10.2 release later this summer.
Cool.
Okay. Just opening up the next one here. So we have Dan, who sends in a DMZ follow-up, which was my raging about the Wii U a week or two ago.
And I got quite a bit of heckling at BSDCAN because I had said accidentally one time DMZ instead of DMZ. Because DMZ just sounds weird. I don't know why.
See? So it's okay to say DMZ. Put the Z in there.
It's really not. Because it's an acronym, it's actually a Z.
Okay.
It's just
we'll forgive you this
after too much Star Trek where they always pronounce it DMZ. You know, I grew up with it being pronounced wrong. Yeah, between that and Korea, the only two DMZs you ever heard of, right?
Right. Just blame me. It's my bad influence. Working with you every week. So, well, anyway, Dan says I got it figured out. I modified the end of the match out and adding rule and added a static port to the end of it. And then he lists the rule here. He said, from the pf.conf man page with NAT rules, the static port option prevents PF from modifying the source port on the TCP and UDP packets. He said, I've been able to jump into multiplayer games with no connection issues at all now. Needless to say, I'm extremely happy to finally have this working. Finally, after a bunch of research stuff, I searched through the OpenBSD mailing list archive with better search terms, game NAT, and found the following entry. He has the link here. He's like, that's the key, and got it all working. My next step is going to be try to figure out if I can compartmentalize this NAT rule so it only applies to the Wii U or other devices that I specifically want. But for now, though, I'm going to sit back and enjoy gaming behind my OpenBSD router.
Nice.
Very cool, Dan. Well, glad you got that working. Okay, next up we have Joel, who writes in about FreeBSD current builds. He says, hello, BSD Now. I've been listening to the show for about a year now, and I wanted to thank you guys for the great job you always do. I've currently learned a whole lot about BSD thanks to you. I have a little question about FreeBSD. I just installed the most recent FreeBSD 11 current snapshot on a test machine and just found out that FreeBSD Update was not supported on anything but release versions of FreeBSD. The handbook specifically recommends upgrading from source. This restriction seems very arbitrary to me, since clearly the FreeBSD organization takes the time to build binary snapshot images. Is there any way we can simply upgrade the base system using a binary upgrade method for 11 current? He says, I'm a little puzzled this, honestly. My background is mainly Debian distributions, which do provide binary upgrades of the whole system, even for the unstable branch. Thank you for all your help.
Yeah.
So you're correct here. The FreeBSD project does not provide FreeBSD update binary upgrades for 11 current. That'll associate with the releases themselves. So I replied back to him before the show, actually, and told him that we are rolling PCBSD 11 current images, which also is TrueOS. So if you want to do just the server part and have essentially FreeBSD, you can do that. And the way we do those is I actually do have a FreeBSD update server that we every month I fire up, and we'll build new binary updates for the next version of 11 current, which usually gets released the first week of the month. Yep. So July will be in a couple weeks here, but June's is out. So definitely go to the PCBSD's download site, and you can grab those if you'd like to do that and stay up to date on our system. And not only that, you get the full package repo with it as well. So that's cool. I don't know if FreeBSD is going to change this, though, Alan, when they do package upgrading.
I think package base will allow updates. It's just currently the way FreeBSD update works is kind of difficult to do upgrades for the snapshots. Like, I know you jumped through quite a few hoops to get it going, right?
Well, so I have to run it in a VM because it does this weird stuff where it changes the system clock, like forward by a year and some odd, to compare binaries. It has to build the binaries twice, and then it changes the clock and compares them again. And was able to build the diffs that way, which was annoying the first time I ran it on one of my production servers, which happens to do other things as well.
And the
all of a sudden
clock's
I had
going
packages,
all over the place.
right? The clock was going crazy, and packages were saying like, I can't build that anymore. It's too far in the future. And so, yeah, I ended up having to run it in a VM. But whatever, it works well enough for us to at least do monthlies. It is tedious, but hopefully when the package.ng base updating hits, that'll just make it all automated. It sounds like they've got that tied into Poudre as well. So
exactly.
I would imagine FreeBSD will start doing that at some point then.
Yeah, and it'll be great to be able to keep forward on the snapshots. Currently, the snapshots are really meant for testing, and so they're really not meant for you to have a long-lived system, but oftentimes it'd be great to have it. But
I'm finding out a lot of people are running these as like their long-term system. They're just upgrading from current to current to current. So.
And rebuilding world from source isn't so bad. It got a little slower when Clang first showed up, but even now I do it on my laptop at conferences from time to time, and it works well enough.
Yeah, I rebuild all my nodes from source whenever we do a new monthly snapshot. It's not, of course, the nodes have lots of CPU. So, okay, we'll say it takes 20 minutes for each one. I give it 4 or 8 cores and let it do its thing. But
even on my 2-core laptop, it usually only takes 40, 45 minutes probably.
Yeah, that's not bad at all. Not bad at all. Merge master is probably the most difficult thing, I'd say.
Yeah.
For the users, just if you're not familiar with which files are what, like you may be tempted to just say install all. Mm-hmm. And I remember it's easy to fat finger that one, right? I remember overwriting my master password file.
Yes, and so your users disappear and your root has no password anymore. Luckily, there is a backup of your master password file made from the night before in like var backups or something like that. Just in case you do shoot yourself in the foot like that.
That's the only thing I wish Merge Master did a little better. It should have like big scary warnings like these files you probably don't want to replace. Or it's like, because the rest usually you just like yes.
Exactly. How about we do the really important files first, like master.password?
Because sometimes they get mixed in, right? So I'm sitting here kind of zombie mode, just hitting Y, enter, or whatever. And then all of a sudden an important one goes by and I've accidentally blown away something I actually cared about.
Yep. Although etc update apparently solves that quite well by doing a proper 3-way merge. Mm-hmm. Although it's only been available more recently because for it to work, you need a copy of a pristine etc from the version you have installed, and then you can diff that against the pristine of the one that you want to switch to, and then diff that against what you currently have and figure out what you've changed. Or rather, it diffs what you currently have against what you should have if you hadn't modified anything, and then reapplies those diffs to the new version.
Yep.
And a system like that is what's built into package, so it'll handle it as well. But based on the working group where we talked about config files, we're going to try to have a lot fewer config files that you edit, or the config file that you edit is one that is empty to begin with. And so the defaults go over here and you never, ever, ever modify that. Just
not doing a merge would be nice.
Yeah, exactly. So the defaults you never modify go over here, and your local overrides go over here. And when you change that file, it never, the installer can just overwrite the defaults and not touch your version, and everything works.
Make that happen, Alan.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
No, that's really exciting that you guys are doing that because, a lot of the pain we've had with upgrading has always been caused by merges and valid user changes, right?
Yes. Damn users, stop changing things.
I know, you guys. If you just ran the system exactly the way we shipped it would be fine. But unfortunately, users have their own opinions on how things should be configured, right? So, I think doing this makes a heck of a lot more sense.
Yep.
All right. So the last one here we have is from Steve asking about ZFS transfers. Do you want to read this one, Alan?
Sure.
This is
so Steve says, it was good to talk to Alan at BSDCAN where I briefly described the issue he's having. He says he's got he's brand new to BSD, so he doesn't really understand dtrace and so on, but he's been running OpenZFS on Linux for almost 2 years now. He says, the problem is I have 2 servers, one of which averages 150 megabytes per second when doing rsync, and the other which fluctuates between 30 and 40 megabytes per second when using rsync. Both are running the same version of ZFS, and their stats are very similar. They're similar-ish machines with lots of RAM, and the one that seems to be much higher powered seems to be much slower. So he shows, his media center machine seems to be able to saturate the gigabit, but his server doesn't seem to be able to.
That's odd.
Yeah. He says he ran a benchmark in each of the servers, and when he uses stuff like iPerf, he's seeing, what he expected to see as far as, file transfer speeds. Even on the server, iPerf is getting 118 megabytes per second like you'd expect. But when he does the rsync, it's just not as good. Also looking at, it looks like when he's writing to it, the RAID Z does 265 megs on the media center and 258 megs on the RAID Z. So he's not sure why when he starts doing file copies, the server is much slower. It can depend on a lot of things, like how fragmented the disks are and stuff. He says, I ran gstat during the file transfer and captured it into a script, which he emailed us, and he's looking for some help to pinpoint where the problem might be. I'll have to pull up that script and basically see what his gstat was playing back and see, if the disks weren't saturated, then something else is the bottleneck, and that probably makes sense. And then he looked at his ZFS version, although he looked at the version of the file system, not the version of the pool. So instead of ZFS get version, you want zpool version. So he says, looking forward to the troubleshooting because he's a BSD noob. Although looking at his thing, both of the machines he's running are running Linux. I guess the server's running FreeBSD now, and that's how he can run gstat on it.
Any idea why it could be a bit slower?
Not off the top of my head. Honestly, if anything, I would have expected it to be the other way around. The machine with the real Technic being able to not saturate it. But no, the Intel should just work.
Wonder if it's more disk write speed there.
Part of it possibly is that the RAID Z in the server is made up of 1.5 terabyte drives versus the one in the desktop is 3 terabyte drives. And there's, quite a bit of performance was gained in the time as they upgraded the drives and just a higher data density. But in his random tests of reading and writing to the RAID Z, he was getting similar results from either one. So I wouldn't expect that to be the problem.
So I had one system I'd put together here where I'd use the wrong SATA cables or something was wrong. And I'd look in my D message and it was not running at the proper speed.
Yeah.
I don't know if he doesn't have any D message output here.
But it'd be interesting to look at that.
Also block sizes. He doesn't say what zpool if he's doing 4K.
If he's doing writes and he's got the wrong block size, that'll do it. But if it's 1.5 terabyte drives, that's before 4K was really a thing.
Oh, does he say how old they are?
No.
I mean, they could be new 1.5 terabyte drives or newer. Check your zpool status to see if it's complaining about that, saying that the block size doesn't match.
Because that would definitely kill your performance, because every time you write a block, it would have to read 4K, modify 512 bytes of it, and then write that 4K again. And, that'd be doing 8 times the work. So you would expect to get quite a bit less speed. In that case, I might expect it to actually be even worse than what he's actually seeing.
Okay.
We'll
a couple things to look at.
Email him back and forth, because for the second ZFS book that Michael Lucas and I are working on, I'm looking for some people with performance pathologies that we can diagnose and put use as case studies on knobs to turn and tools to use to figure out what's going on. So if you too have interesting problems you're having with ZFS or performance, we'd love you to write in and we can use you as a case study.
There you go. Well, great. Send that feedback into Alan so we can use that in a future post. Okay, well, that answers all the feedback and questions we have assigned for this week. So, of course, as we wrap up the show, folks, we want to let you know to keep sending in those comments to feedback@bsdnow.tv. Or if you find a cool story or something floating around the net and you think we should highlight it on the show, try and send it in. Don't assume we've already seen it. Sometimes things do fall through the cracks. So I'd rather get 2 emails on something as opposed to messing something that we should have had. Also, as we close here, we mentioned, Alan, we want to talk about BSDCAN Brazil.
Yes.
Is happening. So it looks like October 9th through the 10th. Where is that located? Fortezilla. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Down in Brazil, of course. So they have their call for papers open. So it says they've gotten extra room for the conference, so they're requesting proposals for even more presentations. So they don't require, it says, any academic or formal papers, but if you want to submit one, of course, they aren't going to turn it down. And presentations are 45 to 60 minutes and can be delivered either in Portuguese, Spanish, or English. Portuguese is preferred, but they will make do with the other languages as well.
So I've zoomed out the map here so you can see whereabouts that is in relation to the rest of the world. If you want to go give a presentation somewhere, where you haven't been before, it's a great excuse to get to travel.
Great way to do that. So it says June 30th is the deadline. So if you're going to try and get a paper in, try and get that in the next week or two so you can make that deadline. But they have a whole list of topics they're interested in. So.
Yeah, I know a couple of people at BSDCAN were talking about submitting papers. So you have some serious competition. Get your paper in soon.
Okay. Well, that's cool. It says they do pay for speakers' flight and accommodation. So there you go. That's awesome. You do have to pay for your own food and drink, though. But I guess that's standard.
It's standard of all the conferences.
Right. Okay, well, cool. So again, if that's something you can get to or want to give a talk for, go ahead and get that submitted. And as we wrap up the show, of course, we want to thank you guys for sticking with us and watching BSD Now. And we'll look forward to talking to you same time next week.